Hello, everyone. Dr. Turner here. And for this week's module on accountability, I wanted to do a video that did three things. First, define accountability. What does this mean? Why should we care? Number two, discuss ways we can hold our students accountable. And thirdly, discuss what it means to hold ourselves accountable and why that matters. So, first, accountability. What is it? It's kind of like a bunch of guys, like blind guys, trying to define an elephant, right? For some people, it's, return on investment, or it means to be responsible, or it's, ways in which we can hold teacher feet to the fire because heaven knows that if we don't do that, they will not do their jobs. And so it means that students get good test scores or whatever, but it's become a nasty word and I don't think it has to be. So, what can it mean to us to be accountable? And the way that I'd like to think about it is to put the caring part back in it. That being accountable to ourselves and to other people means that we care enough to do the best work we can do under the circumstances as teachers, as human beings. And so basically, we have a personal investment. We care. And in order to help define this, I wanted to use this quote from Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. So for all you Zenny and motorcycle-y people out there, this one's for you. But I think this quote kind of sets the stage for the way I want to talk about accountability today. And this is where Pirsig says, "It occurred to me that there is no manual that deals with the real business of motorcycle maintenance, the most important aspect of all, and I would argue teaching," she threw in. "Caring about what you are doing is considered either unimportant or taken for granted." So, caring about what we are doing, I think it matters so much. Even when we're exhausted, if you don't care about what you're doing, please find another job because caring about what you're doing is such a big part of teaching, and we can see through people who don't care, right? So caring to do the best work we can do, and that includes making your students accountable for the best work they can do under the circumstances. Now, if you don't ask for quality, if you can't show what it looks like, you will not get it. This goes back to the first days I was teaching, and I would tell kids to discuss the story we just read in class. Well, I didn't ever explain what makes a good discussion or how to behave in a discussion. So I had chaos ruling, um, and so part of this getting good work is being able to describe what it looks like and what you want, because your students are highly distracted. They're kind of like you are right now. If you don't see the relevance in this video, in the module, in the work you're doing at college, you're going to put less effort into it. So part of it is showing students what you want so that they can invest their best self in their work. And it also has to do with giving assignments worth doing. That means giving them authentic tasks that are learning and experiences in and of themselves, not just assessments like multiple choice stuff to see if they got the right answers, but authentic tasks that they might use in the real world, like presenting things, like giving them bigger audiences than just you, giving them performance tasks with multiple sorts of things you can measure, thinking and writing and speaking. And I would also say that you say no to extra credit. And I know that this is kind of a touchy subject, but if you've gone to all of the effort to design a learning task that has real world implications, that has real skills that those kids are going to learn from that, then why would you let them out of it? So you have a kid who is like afraid to give a public speech. Well, you know what? Part of learning is that it's uncomfortable. And so why would I let that kid out of it when he could learn a lot? Yeah, I might let him give a little shorter speech, and I might let him read that speech and look up less than other people, but he ain't getting out of it because life is difficult. And if you let kids out of the main assignments you give, you're sending the message that they don't matter. So hold their feet to the fire. That's part of it. So, one problem with quality work is how you define it. Like, what does that mean? Like, that's a big abstraction, right? And the Common Core and the content standards don't necessarily help you out here because content standards, core standards, are not the same as performance standards. And here's what I mean by that. Content standards are basically a curricular aim that you want students to be able to cite textual evidence, or you want them to be able to discuss the impacts of human migration, or you want them to throw a ball or be able to draw a picture. We have different curricular aims. The problem with those aims and those standards that we have on the Board of Education website is they're usually not performance standards. That means at what level, what does quality look like? How good is good enough? And so what's great about that and terrifying about that is you have a lot to say about what that means, about how good is good enough. And so this quality, this idea of defining that really, really matters. And you get to do that on your own terms. So in order to talk about, illustrate what I mean, let's talk about the case of Robert, who was a student of mine in the 8th grade. And this was while I was still sort of fleshing out what I wanted students to do with public speaking. And so I gave them the task of writing a soapbox speech in which they would stand up and rally for something they believed. And so I wanted them to support a claim with evidence, right? And I gave them like an hour to type this up in the writing room they'd already drafted. And this is what my dear student Robert came up with after 10 minutes in the computer lab. He wrote, "Senior citizens should not be able to drive because they give everybody a hard time when they do drive. They might fall asleep at the wheel because they did not get their afternoon nap. They are slow at everything they do. Half the time they forget where they are going. One time my mom and I were going home when an old man, probably in his 70s, turned right in our lane and stopped. He was looking around, just sitting there like he forgot where he was going. Then when he saw us, he pointed to where he was going. The same day, an old lady was parked in the right turning lane, looking like she was taking a nap. It's illegal to park there, so a cop pulled her over and told her to move. They say road rage is a problem, but I think old drivers are what causes it, so I think they should take a bus or call a cab." Well, when Robert turned this in after 10 minutes of typing, needless to say, I was not really impressed. I thought he could do better. I wasn't sure if he could do better. The problem is that I didn't know, is this the best work he can do under the circumstances? And my gut feeling was no. My gut feeling, especially if we were talking in Vygotskian terms, right, is that he was working well within his comfort zone, what he can do now. And unless I was going to prod him a little bit, he was not going to get into that learning zone where he was going to have to push himself to do things like look for more examples, like flesh out or develop what those points mean, right? He's not going to do that kind of effort unless I push him to do it. What I'd planned for was I defined the assignment for him. I had linked the assignment to relevant core standards. I had modeled it. I had defined the component parts, like what claims and support are, right? And I had discussed what constitutes evidence. Not only that, we'd already written the drafts. And so I was really kind of irritated that he just didn't hold himself accountable to a better standard than what I thought. What I hadn't done yet, and this has to do with assessment, is really decide what the qualitative levels were. And truly, Robert could argue that he had done the assignment based on the core curriculum, like if he really wanted to. Like, he could say that we're writing arguments to support claims, right? Well, he did. I wouldn't say he did it very well, but if I wanted 3 reasons to support a claim, he had them. He had fallen asleep at the wheel, slow at what they do, forget where they are going. He has 3 reasons. Now, are they developed? No. What I needed was to establish these levels of quality, and I needed to understand them really well for myself, right? Um, I so that I could talk to him about this, not just so I could clobber him with a rubric, because that's not really that useful, as you probably found in your own educational careers. Like, how inspired are you by where you get marked on a rubric, right? But I could use this to be able to have a conversation with him about where I think he needs to go next. If I'm going to push him out of that comfort zone, I need to know where that is. And so right now, if you look at the levels of quality, if I'm clear about them, I can have a conversation about why he's dogging it. So take a look at that. It may be unclear that I have 3 points because I haven't developed him. That that not only helps me diagnose where he is, but push him into the next place. Like, what does it mean to develop? Like, that's a conversation we need to have. It means, dear Robert, that you could have examples for what you mean, that you could have more supporting evidence and talk about what constitutes that supporting evidence. So, establishing these levels of quality, we need to know what those are for ourselves. They're not going to be defined at all or very well on our core and content standards. But the other thing is teacher accountability. And to be honest with you, that day in the writing room, I really did not want to read Robert's paper. I want him to work all hour so that I could have a Diet Coke and chill out for a minute, right? So, teacher accountability means that I needed to see my role a little bit differently. So far, I'd become a master assignment giver. I'd learned to define things and hand out assignments that were very clearly articulated. But what I was not doing next was moving into an even more difficult role, which is that of a coach. Okay, you threw me the ball, and now I'm going to talk about how well you threw that ball and what you can do next. And I'm going to throw it back to you. And that's the part that is very effortful. And so I was sort of resisting that. But when it comes to teaching who you are, I think that role of coach is really important, and that role of model is really important. That means if you teach writing, you should write with your students. If you teach reading, you should enthusiastically read with your students. If you are teaching PE or health, you should be a model of good health. Really, we model this stuff, and especially by middle school, we're modeling a specific content area a lot of times. So I think if if you're all about, being, your students being competitive, literate human beings, you should not be misspelling things on your syllabus. You should not be writing emails with apostrophe errors. You should be modeling literacy. So I think that we have teacher performance levels too. And so in my head, I needed to have in my head what it meant for me to be killing it and dogging it, right? So if I were killing it in that computer room, I would be like monitoring student progress, seeing if kids were stuck, walking the room, answering questions, and making specific and useful observations. That means I could say, this is really interesting. You have this claim. Can you describe it better? Can you give me an example? That's detailed and specific and useful. Now, if I'm just doing my job, I'm going to mostly compliment student work because that's easy. I can say, wow, you have great description. Nice. You have a super duper quote right here. Nice. But if I'm really doing my job and I am finding where you could be stronger, where you could be more literate, where you could be clearer. And so if I give you suggestions, say on a synthesis, it means I'm doing my job. Now, if I'm dogging it, I'm going to make perfunctory laps around the room, and I'm going to say vague stuff like, nice job, or yeah, nice sitting, Sally, right? And if I'm really bombing it, I'm not even bothering to give you the vague comments. I'm just like hanging with the computer lab aide, and we're discussing the relative merits of Walking Dead and Game of Thrones, right? So, teacher performance levels, what are those in our own heads? What do we aspire to? What is the best self we can bring to any moment? So, accountability for high standards, it means that you ask for quality work. It means you show what that looks like. It means that you model what you care about. And it means that you can solicit students' feedback too, like how is it working out for you? What are you experiencing? What do you need? So that we move beyond this sort of sticky note nonsense. Tiana, I'm proud of the progress you are making in writing next time. Try adding more words to your story. In sum, I want to finish with Carol G. Freeman's quote from your book, um, where she says, "These are the years in which they, your students, learn how to interact with the world around them. At times, they will lie, cheat, bully, and make you want to volunteer them to test bungee cords. However, keep in mind that they are a work in progress." And I would say that you also are a work in progress. So as you're thinking about accountability and stepping off the ledge into this teaching profession, be good to yourself, um, and really think about what it means to be accountable in this profession. I look forward to your thinking this week.